Today, one already issued bearer token loses tenant access before its expiry time. The member first lists work items successfully, then calls a small self-removal endpoint. That endpoint returns no content. Reusing the exact same token now returns forbidden, and the token cannot negotiate a new SignalR connection either. We are not building invitations or a complete tenant administration screen. This slice adds one production-minded lifecycle transition to the public companion. Active membership becomes removed, and authorization checks current server state instead of assuming every signed claim remains true forever. We will trace the request through authentication, live authorization, the removal right and the integration proof, so every status code has a visible reason. The mental model has only 3 coordinates. The name identifier claim says which user received the token. The tenant claim says which workspace that token selected. The identity security stamp versions the user's issued identity. A valid signature proves the server created those claims and that nobody edited them. It does not prove the facts are still current. For every tenant-protected request, the live user row must still match the same user ID, tenant ID, and security stamp. If any coordinate changes, the policy fails closed. Authentication still answers who presented the credential. The active membership requirement separately answers whether that identity may use this workspace now. Before this checkpoint, the tenant member policy verified that one non-empty tenant claim could be parsed. That was enough while membership never changed. Once removal exists, it is insufficient. Clearing tenant ID in the database cannot travel backwards into a bearer token already held by a client. The token can remain correctly signed and unexpired, so authentication still builds the old principle. A claim-only policy would then keep accepting the removed workspace. The unsafe shortcut is to call the database update revocation while authorization never consults that update. This is the key production distinction. Token validity and current resource access are related, but they are not the same decision. The name tenant member policy stays stable, but its implementation becomes an asynchronous authorization requirement. The handler reads the authenticated user's identifier, requires exactly one usable security stamp claim, and reuses the strict tenant claim parser. Missing, duplicate, or malformed state simply leaves the requirement unsatisfied. It then asks the membership store whether that exact tuple is still active. Only a positive result calls succeed. Because ASP.NET Core runs this handler before tenant-protected endpoints and SignalR negotiation, denied requests never reach feature persistence. The handler also carries the HTTP request cancellation token into the lookup. An authenticated principal with stale membership remains authenticated, but it receives forbidden because this named requirement did not succeed. Ftenant membership store answers the live question with one no tracking any async query. The row must match the token's user ID, tenant ID, and security stamp at the same time. An empty tenant or blank stamp returns false before touching the database. This is intentionally a live lookup for a security-sensitive teaching slice. A larger system may cache membership, but that cache needs short bounds or explicit invalidation when access changes. Most importantly, the request body, root, and arbitrary headers never supply a tenant choice to this check. Identity users are not tenant query filtered, so the lookup deliberately includes every boundary value in its predicate instead of relying on ambient filtering. The public action is deliberately narrow. Delete API/tenant membership removes the authenticated caller from the caller's current workspace. There is no member identifier or tenant identifier for a client to forge. The user ID comes from the validated name identifier claim, while tenant context carries the server-established tenant. The endpoint itself requires the live tenant member policy, so a stale token cannot repeatedly remove or modify anything. A successful transition returns no content. If the matching row vanished between authorization and the right, the store returns false and the endpoint returns not found. That last not found is defensive rather than a cross-tenant discovery path. The trusted user and tenant pair must still exist when the write executes. Removal changes two existing identity row values before one save changes call. Tenant ID becomes the established empty sentinel for no active workspace. Security stamp receives a new unpredictable value. Clearing the tenant makes the current membership false, while rotating the stamp ensures an old token stays invalid even if the same user later rejoins the same workspace. Both columns already exist, so episode 12 needs no schema migration. This is application-level token revocation. Rotating a value is useful only because every protected request compares the token snapshot with the current row. Saving both values together also avoids a window where one request sees removed membership but another still sees the old identity version. Transport lifetime changes what immediate means. The integration host uses signal are long polling, so sending after removal creates another authenticated HTTP request and receives forbidden. A fresh negotiation or reconnect also runs the live policy and fails. An already upgraded WebSocket is different, it may remain attached to the principal accepted when the connection started. This checkpoint does not claim to force close every live socket across servers. Production chat needs connection tracking, per invocation membership checks or another deliberate revocation strategy. Naming that limit is safer than letting a long polling test imply more than it proves. The transport caveat belongs in the feature contract and the test narration, not hidden in a footnote after viewers have already heard the word immediate. The strongest integration test keeps one HTTP client and therefore one access token. Work item listing returns OK before removal, delete returns no content, and listing with the unchanged token returns forbidden. Another test assigns the same tenant again, the old token still fails because its security stamp is stale, while a fresh sign-in succeeds. Anonymous removal receives an authorized. Signal R tests prove the stale token cannot negotiate chat and that the long polling test connection cannot send after removal. The complete release run reports 56 passing tests with no failures or skips. These tests are shaped around the failure mode, they preserve the credential across the state change instead of signing in again too early and accidentally hiding the stale token bug. We change tenant member from a claim shape check into a live user, tenant and security stamp requirement. The self-removal endpoint derives scope entirely from trusted server state, clears membership, rotates the stamp and saves once. Tests prove the same token stops working, rejoining does not revive it, fresh sign-in succeeds, and signal R HTTP paths authorize. Keep the boundary honest. The companion still stores one active workspace directly on each user, and it does not guarantee immediate termination of an established WebSocket. The next slice should introduce server-stored, versioned membership records and invitation acceptance, then select an active workspace without trusting a client-supplied tenant claim. Invitations, administrator removal, ownership transfer, and multiple active workspaces remain separate vertical slices rather than implied features.